Welcome back. So in the previous video in our series about creating a Django middleware, we've discussed about the templates or response, the process template response hook, which is one of the implementation that may be applied while creating a customized middleware to customize any response of type template response. If you've missed the video, once more again, check out the link at the right top corner of your screen and see what we cover about the process template response. Now, we'll be talking about the streaming response. The streaming response in Django REST framework or in any implementation of HTTP returns an array of byte string. Of course, since we're talking about Python, we will say that in Django, the streaming response returns a coroutine of byte strings. And these byte strings may be converted to a PNG file, CSV file, a PDF file, or whenever you're implementing or converting this byte string to make sense of the data that you're streaming from the server. Now, before we implement our response in our customized middleware, we need to check that the response as a property or attribute streaming. As you can see on the screen, if response.streaming, which should always be true, it will always be true if your response is of type streaming response, or in Django, or this implementation is applied by using the object streaming HTTP response. Let's go on the demo and demonstrate how we can customize our streaming response using our Django middleware. So far, we've covered the process view. We've demonstrates when you can use the process view, which is run right before your view is executing. We've talked about the process exception, which is run right after the view is executing. We've covered the process template response. Now we'll be talking about what if your response is of type streaming response. By streaming response, I mean instead of getting a response of type .json, the response of type JSON in Django is a response that's render a JSON object. We also have a response of type text. And now, if we want to talk about the streaming response, as we mentioned in the beginning of this video, a streaming response will return a coroutine for x for x in coroutine, some coro. If we want to handle a streaming response, we need to check that our response is a streaming response. So we do that by using a conditional if the response has a property streaming, which is a boolean, and this one is always true if you're dealing with a streaming response. And then we can do something like getting the response streaming contents, and by the response streaming contents attributes, I refer to Django streaming HTTP response, which returns a generator of byte string or a coroutine of byte string. So before we check that our response is of type streaming, we need to create a view, and that particular view will allow us to download some data, some CSV data that we create on the fly, and we will use the streaming Django streaming HTTP response objects. Let's create our new view so we can make sense of what will be receiving, what will be returning as a response when dealing with a streaming response. Okay, let's go on our view. Previously, we create my template handler to demonstrate the way we can customize the process template response. We will create a view called, let's create a simple view. We call it download CSV. As always, our handler takes in a request and returns sort of a response. What are we gonna return here? We need to return a streaming HTTP response. And the streaming HTTP response is not defined. We need to import that from Django HTTP ports streaming HTTP response. Okay, so in our streaming HTTP response, we need to return a coroutine of bytes string or a generator of any type. Usually a generator of bytes Okay, so we want to download a CSV, so we need to create our CSV. There is different way we can either use the CSV package from Python and create an instance of CSV, then write bytes onto the CSV instance, so we can retain a CSV file from our streaming HTTP response. But I will create our CSV on the fly. Let's create key value pair. Let's say our key value pair will be our CSV data. It's key. We want to return a list of tuple, so we can build the dictionary, which represents column A and column B in our CSV that will be opening on Excel sheets. So we get our key and we get our value for key value in enumerates. So we call our enumerates, we takes in a list or any iterable, as you can see, and we can create our iterable on the fly using range. We just pass 8,752. So we wanna get a range from 0. We can also range let's start from 1. So yeah, we get that list. So our variable key value pair will retain a list of tuple from which we can build a dictionary. From that dictionary, we can generate our CSV file. So we get that, and now we need to build our generator. As you know, in Python, our explicit, if we want to build a literal generator, we build that by simple brackets. What our generator will be generating on each sequence or sequence of byte string will generate that contain a key separates by comma with value, and we pass our escape sequencing, so we can convert this string to bytes using encode. So we encode that to UTF-8 from key and value. As you may guess, this will come from our dictionary, and we directly build our dictionary from list of tuple key value pair, and we get items. So we get the item in the dictionary return a key return a tuple, which is a key and value, and we loop through items. We get our key value, and from key value we build our byte strings in our generator. So that's our generator, and the streaming HTTP takes in as a first argument the generator of byte strings or a coroutine. And of course, we have a different option like in the content type. Our content type in this instance will be the text CSV. and we want this response to be with a content disposition. Check out the content disposition in online, to understand the content disposition or header, which allow the clients to download the file from the server. And attachments, we pass the attachments options, the file name. Our file name, we name it, we can name our file name on fly CSV. Yeah, on fly CSV. So that's our download request handler. As soon as we issue a request on this download CSV, it will allow the user to download a file CSV that is automatically generated using our chunk of data from the dictionary that we convert each pair to a byte string. Okay, next we need to configure the URL for this request handler. Previously we've used a simple URL named home. Now we can name this URL download CSV, and we need to import our handler download CSV. We pass in our handler, we can name it download CSV. Okay, and so we're using our path will be on policy, will be under policy. As you know, policy is a global configuration. Policy configuration is subject to URL versioning. Now let's check how we can download our CSV file. Okay, yeah, before we check, we need to make sure the server is running. Run server. Okay, our server is running. Check it out. Localhost 8000 B1. What do you have? B1 policy. Now go on home. That's where we stopped last time. We're making sure that by calling the path home, our Django middleware can check if the response is of type template response. As you can see the message in our log, we can see on the log we have type template response. Okay, we're not checking that. Let's try to download CSV. Okay, we can download our CSV. Let's try to open that. Okay, now we can see that we can download our CSV file that we've just generated. So one thing we need to do is that we want to customize our streaming content from the streaming HTTP response, so we can get the square root of each value from this row. Okay, so now that we've created our view that will allow the user to download a CSV file whose contents is generated, on the fly. Our generator that gets data from the dictionary we've just created. Let's go back to our async middleware so we can customize the contents that will be returning from our file. We wanna modify the data coming from our streaming response before the user can download our CSV contents or CSV data that we generated using the range from Python. We want to get the square roots of each value starting from 0 to 8752. So we will do that on our async middleware. This may not be the case where you need to modify each byte stream from your Django middleware, but for the sake of demonstration, we want to demonstrate how we can handle a streaming response in our middleware. Let's create a function that can modify our CSV content. So If response dot streaming equal to true, we can return, can call a function modify response, modify CSV, and the function we takes in the response. Of course, function doesn't exist. That creates our function. We name our function modify CSV data, and our function. Okay, so what are we trying to modify here? We want to modify our response streaming content. The streaming content is where the response content holds data, and this one will be a map of byte string, since we're using the streaming HTTP response. Okay, so let's modify our response. So our response, we need to get declare a variable called streaming content. That variable we take a map, and which will return an array of byte string. Let's pass the function name compute cell. So by compute cell, I mean we need to modify each cell, gets the square root of each value from our data, our CSV data, wanna get the square root of each value, and we do that on our async middleware, our customized. As we know, the map takes in a function and the iterator. So our iterator will be a chunk for chunk in a response streaming contents. Compute cell is not defined. Let's create a compute cell. Takes in each cell. So each cell will represent one box of the row. As you know, in Excel we have a column and row, and the intersection of a row, column, L. So what do you want to do? We are going to create an event loop that will compute those cells so it can be faster. I know, the async IO is out of scope of this video, but for the sake of our demonstration, we'll be using the async IO. So let's import async IO. You're not familiar with async IO, there are a bunch of tutorial and the canonical websites where you can, the Python docs websites where you can check the documentation about async IO. So we create a new event loop. We register our new event loop, async IO states event loop. We pass our loop, and we get the results of our loop. We run our loop until it's complete. What are we gonna run here? We wanna compute how the cell gets the square root. So let's call this function square root of any value, and the value here on our square roots will be the pair value from our key pair. As you can see here, we have the key and we have the value. The key will be named row key and the value will be an integer. We want to get the square root of this integer before we write them on our file name on fly CSV. That's the goal. So let's create a function called async def square root value. Okay, we can name let's name these square roots. We can call, let's name that modify cell. Let's name that modify cell. And how are we gonna modify cell? This, get the cell value. So we need to decode cell. Each cell will return a bytes string. This one will be a byte string. So we need to decode that, convert a byte string to a string. UTF-8, we decode that, we convert a string to a byte string to a string. We strip the sequencing, the escape sequencing, and we split our string using the comma, and this will return, you know, a list of key value. Okay, now we can create our dictionary data dictionary. We build that from our list key value. Now let's encode. After decoding our byte string to a string, we modify. Now we need to modify our cell. Now we are stringifying by using join. What are we gonna join? We're gonna join the key. Join the key with the square root. We need to get the square root of a value. So let's define our square here. Square, it takes in integer and return math square roots. Imports math module. Okay, square roots of x. And the square root of 17, let's say the square root of any odd number always retains some, some value with position, So we can round that. We can round our, square root value to 2 position. Okay, now we need to use our square root of int of value. Of course, value is now defined. Now we add some escape sequencing so we can create a new line for key value in our data dictionary using items. That's what we have, and then we return our encoding. We encode that, we bring that back. As you can see, we went from bytes to string. We modify the string and then we convert the string to bytes because we need to write bytes in our file. Okay, UTF-8. Okay, so our compute cell will return the results from this result should be, let's name the results square results, square roots results, square root value, and then we retain our square root. Okay, so we get our response. From a response, we capture the streaming contents. We modify the streaming contents by getting the key value pair. We get the square roots of the value, pass the square roots of value here, which return square roots of value. Now, what should we do now? We need to modify the response streaming. Remember, the response streaming from the streaming HTTP response is of type map. Yeah, so that's why we create our map function here, and then we pass the streaming contents. From this line, we modify the streaming contents, and then we retain the response. Crazy, right? Yeah, that should be crazy because we wanna, our middleware wanna capture any streaming response and modify its contents before writing it back to us as a download file. Okay, let's save and go check to see how we can get this a square root of each value from the key pair value on our generated data that's we need to download as a CSV file. Okay, let's try it out. Come back here. If we go on home, because that's where we were. We go on download CSV. We should download CSV. As you can see, it's downloading. It's taking a little bit longer because each cell is modified, but it takes not that longer. It's faster because we are using an event loop that automatically computes each cell using our async trading. Okay, let's open that. Join folder. Yeah, so as you can see, we get the square root of each value from our CSV file. Crazy, right? Let's open that on Excel so we can confirm. So open. There we go. We have a square root of 10, which is 3.16, the square root of 11, which is 3.32, the square root of 2, which is 2.41, the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 25, which is 5. Yeah, that's the way we can modify our data in our middleware if we are dealing with the streaming response. A little bit complicated. We've introduced some concept like the async IO, which you may not be familiar with, but there is a lot of documentation online. Check it out. Really great way to use trading in your Python application. Okay, that concludes our video on dealing with the streaming response in Django Middleware from your server. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next one.